I grew up in a Christian home. I always dealt with depression in my life, but never let it show. It wasn't until I was about 12 years old when my great-grandmother passed away. After that, things just started to go downhill. I started to wear darker clothes. I tend to push my family away. I just stopped caring. I didn't try anymore. As high school started, things did not get any better. I cut myself. I did many harmful things to my body. I started getting into drugs and hanging out with a different crowd in my life. And at this time, I still spoke to God, but it was more of yelling at him, asking him more why me, than it was to give him the thanks that he really deserved. It seemed like the suicidal thoughts were non-stop at this point. It was always on my mind. Somehow, how can I end this without hurting everyone else? How can I get this pain to go away that I was feeling? And yet that solution to me was taking in the drugs. I tried to get any high that I could just to numb the pain, and it did temporarily, and then it always came back. Being in those crowds and taking in those drugs, I ended up in places I never imagined my whole life I thought I would be. Still, something was missing. It seemed like there was no hope for me. I was never gonna get out of this, and there was nothing I could do. One thing I always seem to do when I'm depressed is I go for a drive, and there was one night I remember I was in probably my lowest low, and I went for a drive, and I decided at that time this was it. I was done. I didn't want to be alive anymore, so I did some serious harm to myself, and for some reason I was alive. It was not my time, and I knew God had to been there with me, because for as serious injury as it was, I was still breathing.
Hello, it's me. I was wondering if after all these years you'd like to meet to go over everything. They say that time's supposed to heal ya, but I ain't done much healing. Hello, can you hear me? I'm in California dreaming about who we used to be when we were younger and free. I've forgotten how it felt before the world fell at our feet. There's such a difference between us and a million miles. Hello from the other side. I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry for everything that I've done, but when I call, you never seem to be home. Hello from the outside. At least I can say that I've tried to tell you I'm sorry for breaking your heart, but it don't matter. It clearly doesn't tear you apart anymore.
It was shortly after that I met this girl, and she became my world at the time. She helped pull me out of my depression. I just revolved life more around her instead of myself at the time. It was shortly after that we found out she was pregnant. And in that point in my life, I really knew I could not keep going the way that I was leading my life already. As of December 29, 2012, we had this beautiful baby girl, Ella Rose. We named her after my great-grandmother, Eleanor Rose, who I was really close with growing up. When Ella was around 2 months old, me and her mother had split up, and from that point on, her mother became very distant, not just towards me, but to Ella as well. And I really turned towards God at this point to let me be the father figure that I needed to be for this little girl. So I really spoke to God. I asked him to help me through this time and pull me out of this funk and let me start this next chapter of my life. A co-worker and good friend of mine attends CedarCreek, and she always invited me to come and always told me about the great kids area they had for the little ones. One Sunday came and I decided I was gonna go, and I don't know, just something that day in the church really connected with me. I loved the message. As I was picking up Ella through the double-sided mirror, I just watched her interact with all those other kids and see her having a good time, and I knew we were in the right place. On Sundays, I planned everything around going to church. I made sure that we were there, and then it wasn't until about a couple weeks ago, I was sitting in church, and as the service went on and they started the baptisms that evening, I knew the baptism was something I really wanted for myself. I knew I'd been baptized as a child, but I wanted to do it on my own, something in my choice to reconnect with God. At that time, I stood up and I went and changed and I was baptized. I really felt the presence of God. My heart felt open, and I really felt like I was home. I was where I needed to be in my life. 4 years ago, I was ready to take my own life, and then I had my beautiful daughter, Ella, and she's my world, and then getting baptized and reconnecting in Christ and looking and seeing how no matter how lost and dark place I was, God was there with me, and he's still with me today. I know life's not gonna be easy, but I know he's always going to be there at all times.